There's a particular kind of quiet that exists only in an artist's studio. It's not an empty quiet, it's a full one, humming with potential. The smell of turpentine and linseed oil, the dust motes dancing in the slanted afternoon light, the whisper of a charcoal pencil on fresh paper. That was my sanctuary. That was my world. My name is Anya, and for the first 25 years of my life, my world was painted in the warm, golden hues of my family's love. We weren't rich in money, but we were wealthy in something far more precious. We had the old house, the one my great-grandfather built, with its creaky floorboards, and the big, sun-drenched conservatory my father had converted into my studio. We had tradition. We had each other. My brother Alex was my hero, 7 years older, with a laugh that could shake the windows. He was all bold lines and big dreams, a natural-born entrepreneur. Where I was quiet, all soft edges and observation, he was a force of nature. He'd burst into my studio, smelling of fresh air and ambition, and spin tales of the business empire he was going to build. "You just keep making the world beautiful, Anya," he'd say, ruffling my hair. "I'll handle the rest." And I believed him. I painted his dreams. Canvases filled with soaring skyscrapers and sleek imaginary offices. He'd hang them in his first tiny rented office space and tell everyone, "My little sister, the visionary. She paints my future." Then he met Leela. Leela was like a character from a magazine, polished, poised, with a smile so sharp and perfect you could cut yourself on it. She was from old money, as she never failed to subtly remind us. Her family belonged to the country club. Ours belonged to the backyard barbecue. Alex was smitten. He looked at her like she'd hung the moon, and she looked at our family, at our wonderfully chaotic, love-filled home, like it was a quaint, slightly embarrassing museum exhibit. The wedding was a Leela production, a spectacle of white lilies and string quartets. I was the maid of honor, drowning in taffeta, smiling until my face ached. I painted them a wedding gift, a large, vibrant canvas of the two of them. But I painted Alex as I knew him, his laugh lines, his kind eyes, and Leela. I painted her as she was, beautiful, but with a cool, distant gaze. They hung it in their foyer, but I always felt Leela would have preferred a tasteful, expensive print. After the wedding, Alex changed. The bold lines of his personality began to blur, sanded down by Leela's constant, subtle corrections. His big dreams narrowed to fit the dimensions of her social aspirations. He started a new venture, a real estate development company. It was risky, but he was brilliant. He poured our parents' life savings into it, a fact that made my stomach clench with a fear I couldn't name. "It's a sure thing, Anya," he'd assure me, but his eyes didn't have the same spark. They looked tired. I was selling my paintings in a local gallery, building a small name for myself. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I loved my little apartment, my quiet life. I was happy. Then, the storm hit. The market crashed. Alex's sure thing collapsed like a house of cards. The phone calls started, desperate, hushed conversations in the kitchen. My parents, their faces etched with a worry I'd never seen before, mortgaged the old house to the hilt to try and save him. It wasn't enough. The night everything truly broke, they came to my apartment. Alex looked hollowed out, a ghost of my brother. Leela stood beside him, her posture rigid, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. "Anya," Alex began, his voice cracking, "we're going to lose it all. The business, the house, Mom and Dad's house." My heart stopped. The old house, the creaky floors, the conservatory, my studio, the soul of our family. "There's one asset we haven't leveraged," Leela said, her voice cool and clinical. She looked at me. "Your trust fund, Anya." I blinked. My, what? My parents had set up a small trust for each of us from a life insurance policy from my grandfather. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a cushion. Mine was still mostly intact, as my needs were simple. Alex's had been the seed money for his first business. "It's not much, Leela," I said softly, "and it's all I have. With interest. I just need to get back on my feet." What choice did I have? It was my family. "Okay," I whispered, the word tasting like cash. "I promise, I will make this right." Leela simply gave a tight, satisfied nod. The transaction was complete. I signed the papers a week later. A Hail Mary pass. For a few months, there was a fragile hope. Alex said the payment had bought them time. He talked about a new investor. Then, the calls became shorter. His visits stopped. When I'd call, Leela would answer, her voice clipped. "He's in a meeting, Anya. He's very busy saving your family's home." I believed her. I painted furiously, trying to rebuild my tiny savings, trying to quiet the gnawing anxiety in my gut. I avoided going to my parents' house. The sight of it filled me with a dizzying fear. Then, 6 months after I'd signed my life away, my car, a temperamental old thing I loved, finally gave up its ghost. The repair bill was astronomical. I was flat broke. Swallowing my pride, I drove to Alex and Leela's new house, a modern, stark monstrosity Leela had insisted on buying at the height of his brief success. I found them in the backyard by the pristine, unused swimming pool. Alex was scrolling through his phone, and Leela was sipping iced tea, looking bored. I took a deep breath. "Alex, Leela, my car died. The mechanic says it's the transmission. I was wondering if I could possibly borrow a little money just to get it fixed. Just until I sell a few more pieces." The silence that followed was heavier than any I'd ever known. Leela set her glass down with a precise click. She looked me up and down, from my paint-stained jeans to my worn-out sneakers, a slow, cruel smile spreading across her perfectly lined lips. "Oh, Anya," she sighed, her voice dripping with mock pity. "Again? It's always something, isn't it? First it was the loan for your parents, and now it's a car. When are you going to learn to stand on your own 2 feet? You can't just keep running to family every time your hobby doesn't pay the bills." The words hung in the air, toxic and sharp. I felt them like physical blows. My hobby, the life's work I had poured my soul into. I looked at Alex, my brother, my hero. He didn't meet my eyes. He kept staring at his phone, his jaw tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He was silent. His silence was a confirmation, an agreement. In that moment, standing on their perfect lawn, under the weight of Leela's contempt and my brother's betrayal, I felt the first hairline crack splinter through the foundation of my world. And I knew, with a cold, sickening certainty, that it was about to shatter into a million pieces. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the roads, the traffic lights, anything. I just remember the sound of Leela's voice echoing in my head, a cruel taunt on a loop. "Your hobby, stand on your own 2 feet." And beneath it, the devastating soundtrack of my brother's silence. I walked into my dark, silent apartment and collapsed. The tears didn't come right away. First, there was just a numbness, a hollowed-out feeling, as if all my insides had been scooped out and replaced with ice. Then, the dam broke. I cried until my throat was raw, until I was curled on the floor, gasping for air. I cried for the betrayal, for the humiliation, for the terrifying reality that I was now truly, utterly alone and penniless. The next morning, I did what I had to do. I sold my remaining art supplies, my good brushes, my unused canvases, my precious tubes of oil paint for a fraction of what they were worth. It was enough for the car repair and 1 month's rent. Nothing more. I took a job. 2, actually. Waitressing by day, stocking shelves at a grocery store by night. My hands, one skilled at holding a brush with delicate precision, grew rough and chapped from cleaning solutions and cardboard boxes. I was a ghost, moving through my shifts, the vibrant colors of my world muted to a grayscale of exhaustion and shame. I avoided my parents. The shame was a physical weight on my chest. How could I tell them? How could I explain that the money I'd given to save their home had been met with such contempt? That their golden son had sat by and let his wife call my life as work a hobby? It would have broken their hearts. So, I lied. I told them I was busy, that I'd landed a big, exciting commission that required all my time. I'd see them sometimes from a distance. They looked older. The worry for Alex had etched permanent lines on their faces. The house still stood, a monument to my naivete. A year passed. Then another. The grueling work and constant fear aged me. I was surviving, not living. My sketchbook remained empty, the creative part of me locked away in a deep freeze. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday. I was cleaning a sticky booth after a family had left, my back aching when I saw her. An older woman, elegantly dressed, was staring at a small framed print on the diner's wall. It was a cheap reproduction, but it was one of mine. An early piece, a study of light through the trees in my parents' backyard. She caught my eye. "This is quite lovely," she said. "There's a real feeling to it." Something in me broke open. A tiny crack of light in the gray. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice rough from disuse. I painted it." She looked from the print to me, from my tired eyes to my stained apron, and her gaze held no pity, only a sharp, intelligent curiosity. "Did you now?" Her name was Eleanor Vance, and as fate would have it, she was the owner of the city's most prestigious gallery. She came back the next day, during my break. She bought me a coffee and asked to see my work. I had nothing to show her but a few old, dog-eared photos on my phone. She scrolled through them in silence, her expression unreadable. "You have a remarkable gift, Anya," she said finally, her voice firm. "A rare sensitivity to light and emotion. What are you doing here?" The story tumbled out of me then. Not all of it, but enough. The trust fund, the lost security, the need to survive. Eleanor listened, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she placed a business card on the table between us. "This is a waste of you, of your talent. I have a proposition. I have a small studio apartment above my gallery. It's dusty, it's small, but it's rent-free for you. In return, you work for me part-time framing, managing the front desk, and you paint. You paint like your life depends on it." Because it does. It was a lifeline. A crazy, impossible lifeline. I stared at the card, my hands trembling. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because the world has enough waitresses," she said simply. "But it doesn't he have enough artists who can make an old woman feel the sun on her face just by looking at a canvas." I took the lifeline. The studio was a dream. It was small, yes, but it had a huge north-facing window that flooded the space with perfect painterly light. The smell of dust and old wood replaced the smell of grease and bleach. For the first week, I just sat on the floor and cried, tears of relief, of grief, of a hope so fragile I was afraid to touch it. Then, I started to paint, but the colors were different. The soft golds and warm umbers of my past were gone. My palette now was one of stormy grays, deep blues, and angry, slashing crimsons. I painted my pain. I painted the cool, sharp lines of Leela's smile. I painted the hollowed-out ghost of my brother's eyes. I painted the crushing weight of silence. Eleanor would come up sometimes, look at the furious, emotional canvases piling up against the walls, and just nod. "Good," she'd say. "Get it all out. Then we'll find the beauty again." And slowly I did. The anger began to transmute. The stormy grays gave way to the soft lavender of dawn. The slashing reds became the delicate veins in a fallen leaf. I began to paint resilience. I painted light breaking through storm clouds. I painted roots, deep and strong, holding fast to the earth. I was healing, but the memory of the betrayal of Leela's words was a scar that never quite faded. It was no longer a raw, open wound, but a hardened, permanent part of a source of strength. I learned about the art world from Eleanor. I learned about business, about contracts, about the power of a name. I was no longer Anya, the naive dreamer. I was Anya, the artist, the survivor. I also learned the truth. Through a former business associate of Alex's who came into the gallery, I discovered that my trust fund money had never gone to my parents' mortgage. Alex had used it as a last, desperate personal cushion. He and Leela had never been in danger of losing their extravagant lifestyle. They had let my parents believe the sacrifice was necessary, while they lived in comfort. The news should have enraged me. Instead, it brought a terrifying calm. The last flicker of hope for my brother's redemption died, and in its place was a cold, clear resolve. They thought they had broken me. They thought my silence was defeat. They had taken my money, my dignity, my voice. But I had found a new voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It was patient. It was steady. It was the sound of a brushstroke on a canvas, building a new future. One silent, determined layer at a time. They had left me with nothing but my silence. And if silence is all I have, I'll make it my weapon. That is how long it took for the girl who was shamed for her hobby to become the artist the art world was desperate to know. Under Eleanor's fierce mentorship, I didn't just paint. I built a persona. I became Anya Sable, for the rich, dark black of my finest brushes, a name I chose for its strength and its silence. My work evolved. It was no longer just about pain or resilience. It was about truth. I created a series called Quiet Debts, large hyper-realistic canvases that depicted seemingly mundane domestic scenes, but with a subtle, unsettling twist. A family dinner where the shadows on the wall didn't match the people at the table. A beautiful living room where the reflection in a polished silver teapot showed a different, crumbling room. The art world ate it up. They called me a genius, a visionary who explored the fractures beneath the surface of American family life. They had no idea how close to the bone they were cutting. My paintings sold for sums that made my head spin. I bought a beautiful, light-filled loft. I had financial security my grandfather could never have imagined. But I never forgot the feeling of being powerless. I never forgot the taste of shame. I kept tabs on my family from a distance. My parents were still in the old house, struggling under the weight of the mortgage I had supposedly helped with. Alex's business had never truly recovered. He was a mid-level manager now, his entrepreneurial spirit crushed. They lived in a much smaller house, and the strain was visible in the few photos I saw. Leela's social media was a masterclass in keeping up appearances, but the gloss was wearing thin. The country club membership was gone. The designer bags were from 2 seasons ago. They had no idea Anya Sable was me. I'd changed my hair, my style, my entire aura. The world knew me only through my art and the carefully curated mystery Eleanor had helped me cultivate. The time had come to settle the quiet debt. The opportunity presented itself with the city's annual Arts for All Gala, the biggest philanthropic event of the season. The chairperson that year? Leela Wright, of course, still clinging to any rung of the social ladder she could find. The gala's centerpiece was always an auction, featuring a piece donated by a prominent artist. I had Eleanor make a call. Anya Sable, the reclusive, celebrated artist, would be donating a brand new, never-before-seen piece from the Quiet Debt series. The news sent a shockwave through the committee. It was a coup for Leela. Her failing event was now the talk of the town. The night of the gala, I dressed with intentional simplicity. A sleek black column dress. My hair, now a sharp silver blonde bob, was sleeked back. I wore no jewelry except for a single, heavy silver cuff. I looked like what I was: powerful, successful, and utterly untouchable. I arrived just as the auction was beginning. The ballroom was a sea of sequins and self-congratulation. I stood at the back, a ghost at the feast. I saw them immediately. My parents, looking proud but out of place, sitting at Leela's table. Alex, in a slightly too tight tuxedo, his face lined with a permanent worry. And Leela, she was flitting around, the picture of the dutiful chairperson, but her smile was strained, her eyes darting nervously. This event was her last stand. Then, they brought out my painting. The auctioneer unveiled it with a flourish. A collective gasp went through the room. It was a masterpiece of subtle horror. Titled The Benefactor, it depicted a beautifully rendered, modern dining room. A man and a woman sat at a table laden with food, their backs to the viewer. They were toasting with crystal glasses, but in the large, ornate mirror on the wall behind them, the reflection was different. The room in the mirror was shabby, the table was empty, and the man's face, reflected, was etched with despair. And outside the mirrored window, a shadowy figure watched, a single glowing ember where its heart should be. The description in the program was succinct. The benefactor explores the illusion of generosity and the hidden costs of familial debt. The bidding was frantic. It soared past any previous record for the event. Leela was beaming, her success assured. This painting had saved her gala. The final bid was astronomical. The gavel fell. The room erupted in applause. The winner was announced, a famous tech billionaire known for his art collection. Leela practically floated to the podium to accept the applause. Thank you. Thank you. And a special thanks to the incredibly talented Anya Sable for this breathtaking donation. That's when I stepped out of the shadows. I walked calmly, slowly, down the central aisle towards the stage. The spotlight following the action caught me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Who was this? I walked up the steps and stood beside Leela at the podium. The confusion on her face was comical. She didn't recognize me. Not yet. I leaned into the microphone. My voice, when it came, was calm and clear, amplified through the speakers, reaching every corner of the silent, stunned room. Thank you, I said. And you're welcome, Leela. I turned my head and looked directly at her. I saw the moment it happened. Her eyes widened. The blood drained from her face, leaving her expertly applied makeup stark against her suddenly pale skin. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I turned back to the audience, my gaze sweeping over my parents' shocked faces, over Alex's, which had gone a sickly gray. My name is Anya Sable, I said, but some of you in this room knew me once as Anya, right? I let the name hang there. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. My father stared, uncomprehending. I painted the benefactor from a very personal place. I continued, my voice still even, a stark contrast to the emotional earthquake I was triggering. It's about the people who present a beautiful facade to the world, while the reality behind the mirror is one of decay and debt. It's about the price of silence. I looked at Alex. His eyes were locked on mine, filled with a terror I had never seen before. He knew what was coming. I'm so glad the proceeds from this piece will go to charity, because God knows, the last time my family asked me for money, it wasn't for a cause nearly so noble. Leela made a small, choked sound. She was gripping the podium, her knuckles white. The room was holding its breath. Every eye was on me. I had the stage. I had the power. I had the truth. And I was looking directly at the brother and sister-in-law who had destroyed my life, now standing frozen in the spotlight of their own hypocrisy. She finally stands face to face with the one who destroyed her life. The silence in the ballroom was a living thing, thick and heavy. I held it, letting the weight of my presence, my name, my success, press down on them. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to cry. The quiet, factual tone of my voice was 1,000 times more devastating. I turned my body slightly, so I was facing my brother fully. The spotlight felt hot on my skin. Hello, Alex, I said, my voice softening, but no less carrying. It's been a long time. He couldn't speak. He just stared. A statue of shame and fear. 5 years, to be exact, I continued, as if we were having a private conversation in this room of hundreds. Since the day I came to you, broke and desperate because my car had died. The car I needed to get to the jobs I was working to survive after I'd given you every penny of my trust fund. A wave of gasps rippled through the audience. I saw my parents lean forward, their faces masks of confusion and dawning horror. Do you remember what Leela said to me that day, Alex? I asked, my gaze never leaving his. She said I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. That I couldn't keep running to family every time my hobby didn't pay the bills. I let the ugliness of the words hang in the air, let the crowd absorb their cruelty. She shamed me for asking for help, I said, my voice gaining a slight, emotional tremor I didn't have to fake. After I had given everything I had to. What did you call it? To save Mom and Dad's house. I finally looked at my parents. Their faces were shattered. My mother had tears streaming down her cheeks. But here's the truth I only learned later, I said, my voice ringing with a clean, sharp clarity. The money I gave you, Alex, the money that was supposed to be for their mortgage, you never used it for that, did you? You used it as a personal slush fund. You and Leela stayed afloat while you let our parents continue to struggle, while you let me believe I had saved them. The gasp this time was a collective roar. This was no longer just family drama. This was scandal. This was betrayal on a Shakespearean level. Alex made a strangled noise. Anya, please? No, I said, the word final and absolute. You don't get to please me now. You had 5 years. You watched me disappear. You never once checked on me. You never once offered a penny back. You were happy to let me drown. As long as you and Leela could keep up the appearance of your perfect life. I turned to the audience, my heart pounding, but my spirit was calm. This was not about revenge anymore. This was about truth. This was about cutting out the poison so the wound could finally heal. "This painting," I said, gesturing to the benefactor, "isn't my revenge. It's my receipt. It's the proof that I survived you, that the hobby you mocked built the life you can only dream of. The silence you forced on me became the space where I found my true voice." I looked back at my family, at my broken brother, at my horrified parents, at Leela, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "I don't hate you," I said, and I realized with a start that it was true. The anger was gone, burned away in the fire of my own creation. "I pity you, because you traded your family for an illusion. You traded your integrity for a facade, and no amount of money or social standing can ever buy that back." I stepped away from the podium. The silence held for one more beat, and then the room erupted, not in applause, but in a chaotic buzz of conversation, of shock, of scandal. I didn't stay to see the aftermath. I walked down the steps, through the parted crowd, my head high. I felt my mother's hand reach for me as I passed. I stopped and met her tear-filled eyes. I saw no blame there, only a profound, gut-wrenching grief and a dawning understanding of all they had lost. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way," I whispered to her. "I'll call you tomorrow." Then I walked out of the ballroom, through the grand doors, and into the clean, quiet night air. The reckoning happened in the days that followed. My parents, armed with the truth, confronted Alex. The full story came out. The lies, the financial manipulations. The mortgage on their house was, as I'd discovered, still crippling. The trust fund money was long gone. I didn't gloat. I acted. I paid off my parents' mortgage in full. I set up a comfortable retirement account for them. I did it not as a demonstration of my wealth, but as an act of love, of finally, truly, saving the home that had always been my sanctuary. Alex and Leela's life imploded. The social standing Leela had clung to so desperately evaporated overnight. They were pariahs. They ended up losing their house and moving to a different state. I heard they divorced a year later. Alex tried to contact me once, a rambling, apologetic email. I didn't reply. Some silences are a mercy. My silence towards him was my final gift, the gift of no longer being his burden, his victim, or his concern. My revenge was never about destroying them. It was about redeeming myself. It was about proving that my kindness was not weakness, and my silence was not defeat. By facing them without hatred, by speaking my truth without malice, I had reclaimed every piece of myself they had tried to break. The story of the benefactor and the gala became art world legend, only adding to the mystique of Anya Sable. But for me, it was just the closing of a chapter. I still paint in a sun-drenched studio. The colors in my work now are richer, more complex. They hold the memory of the storm, but also the profound peace that comes after. They had shamed me for asking for help, never knowing that I was the quiet foundation that had, for a time, held up their crumbling world. And in the end, my silent revenge wasn't about making them pay. It was about making myself free, because sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's justice wrapped in grace. Silent revenge.